In our last lesson, we talked about David and Abigail. Well, meanwhile, while all that was going on, King Saul was still searching the hillsides for David. A message came to Saul from the Ziphites, probably eager to gain favor with the king, telling him where David and his men were hiding. So Saul musters 3,000 men, and with them he came to the wilderness of Ziph looking for David. And that night, King Saul's troop made their camp, no doubt planning to capture David the next morning as soon as it was light. Well, at that very night, David sent scouts to locate Saul's camp, and then he himself went out into the moonlight to inspect it from a nearby cliff. Well, from David's perch, he could see Saul's bodyguard, a guy named Abner. He was also the captain of Saul's army. And the soldiers were sleeping in a circle around King Saul. Well, suddenly David has an idea. And he asked the men who were with him, who's going to go with me to Saul's camp? Well, it would be a daring and a dangerous mission. So David was wondering if he'd have a volunteer. Well, Abishai quickly answered and said, I'll go with you. So late that night, with the moon shining above, David and Abishai quietly creep into Saul's camp. They're guard soldiers that should have been on duty protecting the camp, and especially protecting Saul, but they were all sound asleep. So quietly, David and Abishai make their way through and around the sleeping soldiers until they finally reach the trench where Saul lay sleeping. They were at his head. And there at his head, Saul's spear was sticking in the ground. And they saw his cruse of water that was beside his spear. And this was the perfect opportunity for David to kill Saul once and for all. And Abishai whispered to him excitedly, God has delivered your enemy into your hand, David. Now let me kill him with his own spear. One thrust will do it. But David restrained Abishai and whispered, no, don't kill him. Destroy him not, for he is the Lord's anointed. It's not for me to take his life. I cannot stretch forth my hand against him. God will cause him to die at God's appointed time, in battle or some other way, but let's get his spear and his cruse of water, and then let's get out of here. So they took the spear and they took his water, and David and Abishai crept silently away from the sleeping army. Not one soldier even saw it or awakened from his sleep because God had caused them to fall into a deep sleep. God was working for David. David could only have this unusual courage because he knew God was with him. He knew that God could protect him even if he was within the presence of his enemy. David's faith in God was strong, and God had honored David's faith by protecting him and Abishai. They quietly crept out of the camp of Saul, just as quietly as they had entered. Well, when David finally came to the hill overlooking Saul's camp, he called out in a loud voice to Saul's army, why don't you protect your king? Abner, Saul's bodyguard. Why don't you protect your king? Abner, why don't you answer? Well, Saul's soldiers began to awaken, and through the moonlight, they looked up on the hill, and they could not believe their eyes because there stood the very David that they had come to capture. And he was boldly showing himself to everyone. Why don't you protect your king? David calls again to Abner and to the other soldiers. Someone came into your camp and could have killed your king. Look now and see where the king's spear and cruse of water are. Well, of course, David himself was holding high Saul's spear and water so that all could see it. Abner and Saul's astonished soldiers looked around and realized that both Saul's spear and cruse of water were indeed missing. And then they realized that David had been close enough to King Saul to take his spear and his cruse of water while they were all sleeping. They also clearly saw that David could have easily killed King Saul, but that he had chosen not to do so. Abner, why have you not kept your lord the king? You're worthy to die because you've not kept your master. Now, see where the king's spear is and where the water is that was in his bolster. And Saul immediately recognized David's voice. Is this your voice, my son David? Saul answered back. David replied, It is my voice, my lord, O king. Why are you pursuing me? What wrong have I done to you? What evil have I done? Has the Lord stirred you up against me? Or is it evil men who have caused me to be driven away from my home to live like a fugitive? Why do you want to kill me? Don't you know that pursuing me is like looking for a flea or chasing a partridge in the mountains? David was trying to reason with King Saul. And Saul, the proud, jealous monarch, was humbled before David's kindness. I have sinned, Saul finally confessed. And then he said, I won't try to harm you anymore because my soul was precious in your eyes this day. I have been a great fool and have done wrong exceedingly. David's doing right, and his kindness toward Saul also inspired King Saul to do right. It usually follows that when we do right, we inspire others to do right. David then called out, Send one of your men over to get your spear and your water, and remember that I valued your life today and I didn't kill you when I had a chance. I pray that the Lord will value my life and also deliver me from all of my troubles. Saul answered, May you be blessed, my son David. I know that you will do great things and triumph. Saul knew deep down in his heart that it was indeed God's will that David would one day take his place as the king over Israel. And Saul also knew that he, Saul, had been doing his utmost to keep the will of God from happening. But now, stirred by David's kindness to him again, Saul openly admitted that David would truly triumph in the end. David was glad that King Saul was sorry for chasing him, but David also knew that it wouldn't be wise to trust Saul's repentance for very long. Well, after this, Saul and his soldiers left pursuing David and went back to their other pursuits. And for the time being, at least, Saul didn't seek to kill David. David and his men went on their way, glad that they didn't have to hide from Saul and his soldiers. And though David was a man after God's own heart, he had plenty of troubles, but the Lord delivered him out of them all. God lets us have troubles too, to make us depend on him. But God will also deliver us from our troubles if we trust him. So just as David trusted God, so can we trust him. Let's ask him just now to help us trust in him.